This short video is going to discuss the geology of the island of Santorini, or Thera, in the Cyclades. Thera was the Greek name for it. Santorini was the Italian name. It was occupied by the Italians for a long time. But we're going to talk a fair amount about this site, about an archaeological site, I should say, found on the island, because it's the Aegean version of Pompeii, where there was this great volcanic eruption that preserved more Minoan wall paintings than anywhere else. And so it's rich with, it's very rich with information about the Minoan society. This site is, in the central part of the Cyclades, or of the Aegean. If we look at the lower left here, we'll see that there's those red lines that says, the Pliny Trench, etc., the Hellenic trenches. What's happening there is a European tectonic plate is touching the African tectonic plate, and there's something that's called subduction, where the African plate is going underneath the European plate and pushing it up. Now, it pushes it up at the very southernmost, where the island of Crete is, but a little bit to the north of that, it gets pushed down. And so there's a lot of volcanoes in this region. As you see, it says the Aegean Volcanic Arch. And it's an arch because that's the shape of the tectonic plate. We see how the island looks now on the right. A long, long time ago, the island had no caldera. This changed over time, by the way, but I don't want people to know this is a long time ago. But for about the last 50,000 years or so, it did have a center, longer than anybody's been there. And I want you to pay attention to the middle line, line on the left. It shows you a reconstruction of Thera. And that's really how it looked during the Bronze Age. And this is going to be really important for some artwork that I'm going to show you later, that you know that it's not too much different than it is now, except it blew out that northeast passage out of the caldera and widened the one here to the south west. This island, Aspernisi, was connected to this island, Theracia, and it was connected here. And as you can see, it made for a wonderful natural arch, or harbor, rather. I'm sorry. It would make for a wonderful natural harbor, and it would be used as such. And we will see that reflected in the artwork. Here's a satellite shot of it, or aerial shot of it, and you can see that it has the round shape with the crater of the caldera. As you'll see, there's steep cliffs on the interior part of the island, but then it slopes off to the sides because it's basically a mountaintop, a volcano's top, that is blown out and filled up with water. In the center are a couple small islands called the Kameni Islands, which means the burning islands. And those are from more recent eruptions. And I'll show you some slides from my visit there. This is a very fascinating island, by the way. If you've ever traveled to the Cyclades, you should definitely go here. If you ever saw the movie Mamma Mia, a lot of it takes place on this island. It's a really, really spectacular island. So it's a bit of a tourist trap, but it's very worth seeing because of that. I want to point out that the archaeological site that was discovered and is being excavated by the Greeks is down here, the site of Akrotiri. And I'll come back to this in greater detail much later on. But this site has been, as I said, covered over by volcanic ash. The Greeks started excavating it in the 1960s, and it produced an extraordinary amount of information about the Minoan period. In the late Bronze Age, the eruption dates to we're thinking about 1625, or the most recent dates that the scientists have. Uh, and so it's going from the Minoan period, but there's sort of some overlap with the early Mycenaean period, which I'll talk about later. And there's evidence for that in the artwork. We can see here with this, yet again, a new roof with the pylons holding up this roof to protect the site from being, quite frankly, washed away from winter storms, etc. And you can walk through the site and see it, and you can see how expansive it is. But a lot more needs to be excavated. It's a town; it's not a palace, and from what we can tell, but it also shows us just how extraordinarily we'll see how extraordinarily rich these towns were with artwork. A lot of people think they were Minoans who lived there. Others argue not necessarily. There's a lot of Minoan influence, that's for sure. But they did, have some things different than the Minoans. Their pottery is not exactly the same, etc. That you don't need to concern yourself with that debate. So a few years back, I was there with a group of students from the University of Arizona and with a geology friend of mine who was leading a tour there. And we did the geological study of the island, or not study, he gave us a geological tour. Took this boat to out to the center of the central islands, the Kameni Islands, to see where the more active, more recent volcanoes were. And indeed, we went out there and we can see these large chunks of black lava that had solidified right after the eruption, and it's just this sort of lunar landscape of petrified volcanic ash. And there are still warm springs around these islands, so you can go swimming in water that's fed by these thermal springs. When you look off the island back to the main island of Thera, you can see the layers of geology prior to the eruption. And I'll come back to the Minoan eruption in a moment. But I want to point out all those different geological layers, because we'll see that reflected in the artwork. And though this slide doesn't get it as clear as I'll be able to show you later, there were, the colors like the red band in the center there is very red. And there's some really brilliant colors that come out of this view. Back to Nea Kameni Island. Here we are on the island, and you can see the main island of Thera behind it. And, as I said, it looks like a lunar landscape. And you walk around and see the various remains of the more recent volcanic eruptions. I think the last one was in the 1940s. None of these, however, were as massive as the Minoan eruption of the Bronze Age. And that island that I just showed you is here behind this large boat, and this is a view from the rim of Thera looking down at the Kameni Islands. Just to give you an idea of the size. As you know, these boats are massive, easily 2/3 the length, if not the whole length of the campus. To give you an idea just of the size of everything. Tourist boats come in like crazy there. It's probably second or third only to the Acropolis and Knossos in Greece as a tourist destination. Best to go in the spring or fall. There's fewer tourists. It's very beautiful, very beautiful. But as I say, in the summer it can be pretty packed. But in any case, you get the idea for the lay of the land. In this eruption would cause the preservation of a large archaeological site, which we will talk about in the next lecture. We see here the West House, which preserved a lot of frescoes for us, and we see multi-storied buildings. Oh, and here's the geologist on the left, Floyd McCoy, back again with a couple other colleagues who we traveled out to the central island with. And here's a harbor, by the way, at these islands, because what was very interesting was that a lot of the stone and pumice from the Minoan eruption was quarried out because, as it turns out, it's sort of a strange pumice. The This white pumice is going to be on the top. You don't see it clearly here, but you'll see it soon. It was used in the Suez Canal because, strangely enough, when you put it underwater, it becomes waterproof. So they've lined the whole of the Suez Canal is lined with the ash from this eruption in order to make the lining of it waterproof. It just is one of every volcano has its own signature tephra, and that's what the Minoan eruption can do, geologically speaking. And here we see it, this white part here on the top. That's from the Minoan eruption. And here's some other shots of it. I like this this shot, and we can see it's really, really deep at some points. But what it shows here is that the earlier parts of the eruption produced a lot of fine white tephra or ejecta, things that this dust that came out of the volcano when it was erupting. But what happens in these volcanoes is then is when water interacts with them, they become very violent. So you might have seen on TV volcanoes where the volcanic ash brings in storm clouds and starts to storm over it and rains into the volcano, and that causes the eruption to go even crazier. Well, that's what happened on this one. And when the caldera was blown out and water, well, the caldera wasn't completely blown out, but parts of it were blown out, and more water rushed into this hot lava. It started shooting up these large blocks, these black blocks of stone on the top there. And also see some of these are quite big, the size of a car. And some of them we'll see at the site went through the roof of the site and landed in people's houses. So volcanologists, the people who study volcanoes, have been able to study this stuff and realize the various phases of the eruption. And once again, we see with the terrain, the reddish brown terrain on the bottom was the terrain of the Bronze Age, and then this Minoan ash is on the top. And if we look really close at it, you can see that at first, yes, it was sort of fine grained tephra, and then it became larger grained tephra, and then eventually those big black rocks. And as I said, some of it is just is massive. The amount of deposition. This is one of the some of the houses at a town called Thera, which is the main town of the island. And just look how deep the ash is there. Interestingly enough, we think everybody knew it was coming because no skeletons were found at the site, and not many precious items. Wall paintings and pottery, but we think they got off the island and took all their precious metals, etc. Although there was a body found on one of the islands, the little island to the west called Thera, but in any case, that's an isolated incident. This is not like Pompeii where many corpses were found. It's quite the opposite. And here we see some more shots of the tephra, the modern tephra, and was basically exposed here for us because of these quarries that took out the tephra to be taken to the Suez. And once again, just another shot of the contact zone. It changes colors and depth depending on where one goes. But once you know what you're looking at, it's very interesting, very interesting. And as I said, it preserved an archaeological site. Once again, the eruption is probably about 1625 BC. And this site is very impressive and quite large. Some multi-storied buildings, You can see the people in the upper left there in the back to give you an idea of the size. So these are really, really interesting remains. And have just preserved a lot for us. And as I said, I'll spend upcoming lectures talking about the frescoes that were found. Further information about how they're multi-storied is seen here with this collapsed stairwell. And some wonderful pottery. Let's take my word for it. This is purely a Thera. This type of pithos is found only on this island. In any case, it gives us a lot of information that preserves for us the most Aegean wall paintings we have. Just like for the Roman society, Pompeii preserves the most amount of Roman wall paintings. And with the next lecture, we will turn to a lot of the wall paintings found here.